Welcome to the Startup Help Desk, your source for answers to questions about building companies, starting companies, and the meaning of life. We have a panel here of the successful founders, investors who have learned all the hard lessons, and our job is to share those with you by answering questions that people like you have submitted to us. So as always, we have our illustrious panel, including myself. I'm Sean Burns. I've been a founder for about 20 years, starting companies like Flurry and Outlier AI. These days, I mostly invest in companies as a venture capitalist, but I'm also joined by Nick and Ash.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ash Rust, and I'm a pre-seed investor based in San Francisco. I mostly invest in B2B companies based in the US and UK through my fund, Sterling Road. I've also worked at places like Trinity Ventures as an entrepreneur in residence and Bullpen Capital as an advisor. Before investing, I was an entrepreneur myself, most notably an early employee at the social media analysis company Clout, as well as the co-founder and CEO of SendUp. These days, I spend most of my time coaching founders, and I've helped more than 1,500 startups over the years.
Hey, this is Nick Melionis. I'm co-founder and CEO of a startup called Navi. We help people and organizations start their innovation quests and achieve some great outcomes along the way. I've had a chance to support hundreds of innovators and startups, and as always, I'm excited to get into today's questions.
And all of today's questions, in addition to being submitted by people just like you, are about innovation. So we get lots of questions submitted through both our website, thestartuphelpdesk.com, or on Twitter/X at thestartuphd. And by the way, if you have questions, please submit them. We'll answer them in a future episode. But today's questions are all submitted around innovation. So people talk about startups. You need to be innovative. Innovation is the core of the startup economy. But what is it? What is innovation? How do you use it? Can you make it an advantage? We'll jump into all that stuff today. And we were thinking about how to sound really smart about innovation. And then we realized we have here an expert on innovation in the form of Nick. So Nick, you're going to be in the spotlight today answering a lot of these questions for us. Hopefully you have innovative questions. But Nick, how about you start us off?
We believe in you.
Oh, I appreciate that. This is a grand entrance here.
You're on the spotlight, so make us sound good. So let's start, before we get to the questions, let's level set. Nick, what exactly is innovation? People throw this word around, but what's the definition we should use?
I appreciate you starting things off with that. The word is used so prolifically that in a lot of ways we've kind of lost track of its meaning. I'll put it this way. Innovation is the process to generate a new method, idea, or product that solves a problem. There's two pieces I'll add to this. One is that typically you want innovation to lead to some form of people actually adopting your solution. So you're not just inventing things for no reason. You're actually trying to drive adoption in some way. Second thing is that innovation is an umbrella term. Within innovation, there are other facets such as entrepreneurship, corporate innovation, social innovation, you name it. There are different efforts to ultimately drive some grand outcomes within it.
Okay, so is it too simplistic to say innovation means you're going to do things differently?
I would say that you're going to do things differently in order to either address an existing problem or meet a need. I think that's the key thing there.
Fair enough. Okay, let's jump into some questions.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that would be an innovation in the startup world. I thought we were supposed to raise VC cash. Ash. I didn't know we were supposed to make revenue.
This is the new post-SoftBank era. Welcome, Sean.
Okay. Let's jump into our questions about innovation. Here's the first one. Is there a process to follow for innovation? I'm not entirely sure what the question's asking, but I think they're getting at is there a uniform process? If I want to be innovative, I can be innovative. What do you think, Nick?
Yeah, this is a fantastic question because ultimately a process for innovation is, in a lot of sense, the golden ticket. There are several popular processes that can help somebody march forward on their innovation quest. I'll list a few so folks can know what they are. There's human-centered design, design thinking, lean startup methodologies. There's also what I would call the Ash Rust on Medium method and the Sean Burns, the breaking point on Substack method, each of which includes some fantastic gems to make sure that folks know.
Very generous of you to include me there. Thank you, Nick. Checks in the mail.
This Sean Burns guy sounds really smart. We should listen to him more.
Actually, a total misnomer on that one.
I'll tell you this. Everyone I listed on there are incredible resources that I go to for inspiration or to figure out how do we innovate. There's a couple things that are consistent across these. The common start for anything in innovation is quote unquote the problem. It is exceptionally difficult to identify and correctly describe a problem. And so a lot of your legwork in the early days for innovation is to unearth the problem. You can do that in a lot of ways. User interviews are a key facet within that. Fast forward through this innovation process, really you want to have an explosion of ideas and then find fast incremental ways to test and bring your idea to life. I'll pause there though. There's really a lot that goes into this process. What's both your take on it?
Well, Nick, let's say that we follow that process. Is there like a corollary here that like, am I doing a good job following the process of innovation? Like, let's say somebody invites you in to their company and they're like, we think we're innovative, but you tell us, what do you look for as indications that somebody really is following a process for innovation?
I would say that one is, are you effectively documenting the existence of problems in some way and really treating it like a problem? The common challenge that folks face is they say, here's the problem that we solve. People need an app to do this. And when you hear that, you think, oh, that's not a problem. You're describing what you believe to be an opportunity. But what exactly is the obstacle that's stopping somebody from achieving some grand outcome? And so good organizations and exceptional founders are very good at explaining a problem and giving evidence that shows that it's a problem and there's demand to solve it. So I'd say you can really start your quest by evaluating, are you unearthing and articulating problems effectively? If so, you've got the right spark to make this thing happen.
Okay. Well, so Ash, you're an investor. I mean, you tell me, I imagine that innovation is something you look for in the companies you innovate or you invest in. What do you think? Is there a process for it?
Kind of. I think there's more a set of characteristics for it. So small teams with significant constraints just as a result of being a small team makes a big difference in terms of the likelihood of taking a leap forward. Working on problems that desperately need to be fixed. So you obviously have to talk to people in order to understand those, not do surveys. And that helps drive motivation as well as prove demand to people that maybe need to fund it in some way, either through time or money. And then being willing to take a big swing. Like, what is the closest solution to magic that you can plausibly build? Try and do that. That is where you're likely to have an advantage. It's not going to be easy, of course, but neither is building a business. And actually trying to build a business with minimal advantage is actually pretty tough as well. And then try with, based on the demo of this magical product or this magical idea, try and get a few people to believe enough to try it. And then you're going to have to rinse and repeat it. But the core element of innovation, at least from the patterns that I see with these formation stage companies, tends to be just uncomfortable situations. So short deadlines, pressurized situations, small teams, those are going to be the ingredients of innovation in most cases.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. And I'll add on that too. And then Sean, I'll kick it back to you. Within an organization, really you need senior leadership in order to define a good outcome, so to speak, and help explain the fact that there are the existence of some obstacles that could be stopping us from being able to achieve that. They then need to empower folks to actually be the ones to go investigate that, do the user interviews, and then empower them to have the authority to produce solutions, test solutions, and iterate on that. So it needs to not just be a top-down directive, it needs to be very much a bottom-up approach in this type of corporate setting for innovation.
I have nothing else to add, mostly because I'm riding high on having my newsletter called out as a source of truth. So I'm just going to be riding high for a while. Ash, you take it over. What other questions about innovation do we have?
Okay, next question. Do you need to innovate? What's the cost if you don't innovate?
Yeah, I love this. The cost for doing nothing can be catastrophic. I'll just share one quick point, and I'd love to hear both your thoughts on it. There was a PwC survey that came out earlier this year. They surveyed more than 4,700 CEOs worldwide, and they were asking about just sentiment about their business's viability in years to come. The results show that 45% of the respondents were worried that their businesses wouldn't be viable in a decade without reinvention. Essentially what they're saying is if they are incapable of innovating, they won't be able to participate in the world of tomorrow. So I'd say those costs are quite severe.
Well, yeah, I think if you're a business, it's hard to have more severe costs. I do think there's a cost. Well, let's put it this way. If you're a startup company, you have almost nothing going in your favor. You have less resources, you have fewer customers, less money, fewer people than almost everybody else. So you need something in your favor, and often innovation.
You have big dreams
and podcasts. You have big dreams and a podcast, but
that can go a long
you need
way.
something else. And so innovation can be one of the few areas that you can get a handhold or get an area that you can compete by innovating on the business model or innovating in the product. So I do think without innovation, it's hard to see a startup company winning, because you certainly won't win by playing by the same rules of big companies or established players. You win by creating a new game, and often that's innovation. But it's really hard to do, because until you've done it for a while, like, it's a new skill. Lots of people who come from big companies struggle a lot with it, because I find that it's a skill that, like, you might think you can do it, and in the practice of doing it, it's difficult, but you absolutely have to. Although I will say this, I think of innovation a little bit like a head start, because if you're at all good and you have a really good innovation, everyone will copy it. People talk about patents and stuff. It's very hard to predict your innovation. So an innovation is a head start. Hopefully you continue to innovate so that head start turns into more head starts. Otherwise, everybody will catch up with you and you lose your advantage. At least that's my take. Although I have a question for you, Nick and Ash, which is, there's this great theory by Clayton Christensen called the innovator's dilemma. And the idea is that companies that are innovative eventually have an incentive to become less innovative the more successful they are. But right now in 2024, we're seeing all the big tech companies become leaders in LLMs and AI in a way that tells me that maybe the innovator's dilemma isn't alive and well. What do you guys think? Is the innovator's dilemma still a fact of business, or is it giving way as technology marches forward?
I've always thought that that theory was correct, in the sense that great companies over time get worse. And it's mostly because, at least from my perspective, the quality of the people gets worse. And so it's just less attractive to be there. And so they make less good decisions in terms of things like innovation and product. I would argue that while there are plenty of big companies doing well out of the AI boom, I think the emergence of some credible threats to these big tech companies is a really good example of how they've slowed down their innovation and how a paradigm shift has occurred. Nobody would have ever dreamed of paying $20 a month for search 2-3 years ago, but now obviously a lot of people are doing that with OpenAI and Anthropic.
I love the way you put that. The one thing I'll add is a credible threat is also one of those things that can drive urgency. And it does seem that if the environment is one with urgency, those type of constraints are things that drive innovation. And so perhaps this credible threat that exists for companies is also an engine of driving their innovation.
Fair enough. I actually asked a question, or Nick too. Have you guys ever seen a startup company that succeeded without having at least one fundamental innovation at the core of what they do?
Depends on what succeed is. Plenty of companies without that had their founders take a bunch of capital off the table in time. But whether or not any of those companies went public and generated real revenue for their investors, I do not recall where that has been.
And Ash is not bitter about that at all. Nothing in what he said can be considered being bitter.
I'm totally fine about it. Stop bringing it up.
That is good. Sean, I should add one thing. This is something you mentioned in a previous podcast where you were saying that in a lot of respects, distribution is the business. And so I like the way you framed that, because in a lot of companies, even if you don't see the innovation in their solution, the innovation could come through how they reach customers, how they expand the business. And so I do think that innovation is essentially an absolute requirement for existence when it comes to building a business.
Yeah, I can't name any companies that I've ever seen even reach any level of success without innovating. And you're right, Nick. In fact, sometimes the most important innovation isn't even in the product; it's in the go-to-market motion or how you get distribution. And those can be some of the best innovations, because often A, they're the hardest to copy, but B, they mean they get you customers, they make you money. You can have a great innovative product, and if you can't sell it, really doesn't matter in the end. Okay, innovation is great. Let's innovate on this podcast by getting to our third question here. So this one actually is a really good one. If you talk
That was a stretch in terms of a
I'm working on my segues.
I didn't want to say anything. But I threw up in my mouth, so I thought I won't be alone. I need to call that out.
Innovating on our segues here, doing our best. Okay, so it's funny when I talk to founders. This next question is something that often they will share with me in those quiet moments when we're consumed with self-doubt. How do I know if my company is being innovative? Nick, what do you think? How does a company look at itself and ask the hard question, are we really being innovative or not?
This is an awesome question. Being innovative is not just coming up with a bunch of ideas. I feel as if that's the natural instinct. Let's be innovative and let's start coming up with a bunch of ideas. Instead, if you want to be principled about it, I like to think about it with these 3 questions. First would be, are you talking to customers, stakeholders, anybody that perhaps faces a problem, and understanding life from their shoes to understand what kind of opportunities exist? Second is, are you describing problems with precision? Not, we need an app to do this, but actually describing somebody who faces an obstacle on their journey towards achieving some great outcome. And then lastly, and this is the ideation part, are you brainstorming a variety of solutions? And then being tactical about prioritizing and running incremental tests in order to advance. If your answer is yes to those, then you get a thumbs up from me when it comes to innovative. What do y'all think?
So I wouldn't say there is, unfortunately, a set of rules or checkboxes to complete to know if you're being innovative. And I think it's almost a little bit dangerous to maybe seek that badge out, although obviously a Nick Melionis Gold Star would be the pinnacle for many of us.
And some gold pancakes.
Right. We've got a trophy idea already.
There we go.
There we go. All right. Send it in, folks. A golden pancake trophy.
Yeah.
And we will mention your name. All right. So I think some just general patterns again to look for from the investor perspective. Do customers desperately want your product, or at least want the idea of your product? Does that incite demand? Do people reach across the table and want that badly? If so, then you're on at least the path of innovation. Doesn't mean you can do it, but it means that at least you're working in an area where people are going to be excited about what you might produce. If you have it live, as Sean mentioned earlier, if you're innovating, one of the best ways of knowing you're live is everyone's copying you. Every single phone looks the same pretty much, right? They all look the same as an iPhone, and they have done for about the last 10, 12 years or so. Apple was the innovator there. Everyone else copied, and now we're kind of stuck, right? Well, the next paradigm seems to be folding or perhaps moving off those devices completely. But it's very, very clear because everyone copies you, and the smartphone market is one of the best articulations of that. And then the last one that I like to look at is verifiably better than the competition. So is there some kind of numeric metric that expresses you being X or Y% better than the competition? And hopefully that's something that actually matters to people. So you are faster, cheaper, stronger, whatever it is. Are you verifiably better than whatever else is out there?
Just as a vote in favor of what Ash said, if you have something even remotely innovative, people will copy it. I have been lucky to have some innovative ideas in my career, but if I tell people, they don't believe me because then everybody adopts it. It becomes the normal thing. And so I can, hey, Sean, have you had any innovative ideas? Sure, I have. And they're like, oh, no, everybody does that. So your reward for being innovative is that everybody will just assume that you didn't actually come up with it. Everybody's always done it, and you're just making up stuff. So that's the reward.
And better still, you just wait till it's mainstream. Then you ship your version with a silver cover and call that innovation. People believe it. At least if your name is Apple.
I love it.
Well, I would say that there's another stream emerging from this too, which is that when it comes to impact, innovation, if you're doing it right, should equal impact in some capacity. And ways that you can align with impact is observing some of the tectonic shifts shaping the world and solve problems that are within that domain, so to speak. And as Sean put it, you might, in fact, create a new category that gets copied over and over in the process.
Exactly. Just like we do with podcasts. People don't realize we actually invented podcasts. We were the innovators behind it. Now everybody's copied us and we just don't
I don't
get
know
the
why
credit.
you always make that kind of ridiculous claim. We invented the internet.
Oh, man. We talked about innovation a lot. It's at the core of startup companies. There's no easy answers. But we've covered as much ground as we can. Nick and Ash, as always, thanks for helping us innovate on how we answer questions.
Glad we could bring the noise.
Absolute blast.
We will be back in future episodes. If you'd like to hear your questions answered, we would love to answer them. Submit your questions on our website, thestartuphelpdesk.com, or on Twitter/X as thestartuphd. For now, the Startup Help Desk is closed, but we look forward to being back in the future. In the meantime, good luck in building your business.